This is Ron Guittardi, volunteer director of the oral history program of the Battleship New Jersey. We're here in Moorestown today, and today is April the 26th, 2016. And we're here to interview Kent Deasy, who was in the Marine Corps in the 1950s and served on the Battleship New Jersey. Good afternoon, Kent.
Good afternoon, Ron.
Kent, would you tell us your age, please?
I'm 80 years old, sneaking up on 81.
Okay, and how old were you when you entered the Marine Corps?
Just 19,
What year was that?
1954.
Tell us how you got to be in the Marine Corps. How did you decide to join the Marines?
That's a pretty good story. A very good friend of mine and that I went through grade school and high school with here in Moorestown. It was a Friday night. He had a driver's license. At that time, I don't think my father let me use the car, so he said, well, let's go down to Camden and we'll go see a movie. And there was only two theaters in Camden. One, I think the old Stanley and Savar. I have no idea whether they're still there. They were on Federal Street. And we parked somewhere and we're walking up to one of the movie houses and we see John Wayne, Sands of Iwo Jima. And a war movie, let's go watch that. We watched the movie, we came out, there was a little booth with a Marine Corps sergeant with all his medals, and he was in white, blue, white, and he talked to us, and he gave us a brochure. And the next thing I know, I was at the Customs House in Philadelphia being sworn in and on a train down to Paris Island, so you know how smart I was.
How did your parents feel about this?
I remember coming home and my dad was, even then, it was pretty strict about, what have you been doing, how late you could stay out. And I came in and my mother was going upstairs on the stairwell and my father said, what did you and Stevie do tonight? I said, we went and saw a war movie. And my father said, was it good? I said, yeah. I said, it was John Wayne. And he said, and then what else did you do? And I said, I joined the Marines. And my mother, she said, you what? I said, I joined the Marines. I said, we have to be at the Customs House next week at a certain date. She was not, my father said she cried, but she thought I was going to go back to school, and I dropped out of Rutgers in Camden and I was going to go up to the state in New Brunswick, and next thing I know is at Paris Island. It was quite a change from.
I'll bet.
It was.
Tell us about Paris Island.
Well, I was told by a friend a couple of years before that was older than me that and he was still in the Marines, but he said, Paris Island can be rather tough, but he said, I learned very quickly, he said, if you keep your eyes and your ears open and your mouth shut, he said, you'll go through, I don't know whether it's a breeze, but you'll go through without any problem. And I found those three things were, that was pretty true. Of course, this was Paris Island pre Sergeant McKeon's, which took place a year or two later, where he had the 6 recruits drowned at Ribbon Creek at Paris Island, and that opened up Paris Island to, quote, the civilian population and congressmen. And when we were there, there was one person, your DI. You were told how to breathe, when to go to the bathroom. You could write no letters. You could listen to no radio. I didn't go to a PX until I was there 10 weeks, and they marched us there and they told us what we could buy. I mean, you were in boot camp there. I mean, that was it. They read your mail, and they read your mail when it came in, and if they didn't like it, they read your letters that went out, and if they saw something that didn't look right, they'd in a trash can. It was 12 weeks of training. It was a real attitude adjustment. And that's what the DI said, you're going to get an attitude adjustment. He said, and I'm going to be the adjuster. And they did hit you. They were allowed to. I don't think they can now. I said after this Sergeant McCain thing, but boy, they use their swagger sticks, and boy, they whack you in the back of the head, your teeth would come out. You know, yeah, they were physical.
Now, at the time that you entered, Kent, the Korean War was over.
The Korean War had been over a year and a couple of months.
Okay, so you weren't really concerned about that at that time.
We were trained, of course, after Paris Island. I did a couple of months at Camp Lejeune. It was just called Advanced Combat Training, or something like that. It was in the field, and of course weapons, and so some of the fellows ended up, of course, going to the coast and then going to Okinawa or Japan, or I put in for, you were allowed to put whatever it was I put in, I'd like to try sea duty because a friend of mine had been a seagoing Marine, and I got it. So I ended up doing my military service between Norfolk, the Mediterranean, and ports in Europe, at Guantanamo Bay quite a few times for firing the guns and that sort of thing. But I was with the Sixth Fleet basically most of my Marine Corps. I was in an MP company for 6-7 months. That's where I finished my duty in Norfolk. So Norfolk and the Mediterranean were sort of where I spent my time.
Is it true that the infantry guys and the Marines looked down upon their seagoing brethren?
I think the grunts, they call them, it wasn't called grunts then, but yeah, we were seagoing bellhops, I did spend enough time in the field to realize that it's a lot more comfortable, even on an old spring mattress, triced up, 5 of us stacked up in a ship, was a lot better than sleeping on a poncho with a can of Sterno to keep warm in the field.
Those guys were just jealous, right?
It could have been a little of both. I think, every Marine is the toughest Marine, and if you were a field Marine, combat Marine, so that I guess there was a point there. I was very fortunate. I enjoyed the sea duty. No one was shooting at me. It was good duty. The Navy was good to us. Good chow. I enjoyed my time aboard the Jersey. I got to see a lot of the world, a lot of Europe, all the way up to Norway, Scotland, just about every port in the Mediterranean.
How much of the world had you seen before you entered the Marine Corps?
I had been to England, where my father was born in I think my freshman year, 1950 or 51, maybe something. It was a 2-week cruise, actually aboard the Queen Elizabeth, the old Queen, and so that was my first time on a big ship. That was, I think we were like 4 days going over, 4 days coming back, and we were like 10 days in England and visited a lot of relatives.
Do you remember when you first saw the New Jersey? Was it in Norfolk?
It was in Norfolk. It was in home port. The Marine Corps had a sea school at Portsmouth where you trained for sea duty, and then there was it was called Ocean View, but somewhere near Ocean View, Virginia, there was a gunnery school where you learned the 5-inch gun mounts, the 3-inch 50s, which a lot of the cruisers had. I actually had a lot of time on a 3-inch 50 and didn't know a thing about a 5-inch gun mount. And I got, for a short period of time, was on a 5-inch mount aboard the Jersey. But sea school was a lot of, again, now you were out of the field, the combat boots and backpacks and the cartridge. It was white, blue, white, tropicals, brass buttons, white duty belts, white gloves, white bayonet, scabbard covered. It was entirely different because when the ships hit foreign ports, unlike the Jersey, when the Admiral was aboard in the Sixth Fleet, Admiral Parker, we were the showpiece of the United States Armed Services, the Navy, showing our strength and what we could do and how sharp we were and one thing or another. And we had to present ourselves. As a matter of fact, to get a pass to go on, quote, liberty in foreign ports, you had to go before a sergeant of the guard. And he started down at your feet and worked his way up. And if there was a hair sticking out the wrong way, if you could get it cut, fine and done. If you could get your uniform pressed properly the right way in time, otherwise you didn't get liberty. You were not allowed to go. You had to pass an inspection. It was very spit and shine.
You had to look sharp as well as be sharp.
And not everyone, but I would say 85%, a good 85% of our detachment was 6 foot or over. And they did that on purpose when these dignitaries came aboard, the Prince of Norway, General Isimo Franco of Spain. They wanted to show size, power.
How big was the detachment?
62, 64 maybe, sometimes 62, 64. Aboard ship at that time, when there wasn't midshipmen aboard, the complement of the Jersey was 1,900. I think a battle complement was 2,200 or 2,300 during the Korean War and World War II. But we picked up, it was either 500 or 600 midshipmen at Annapolis for these Mediterranean cruises. So everybody in the compartment, instead of maybe being 3 tiers high, we slept on top of laundry bags. We were stacked up like, you laid in a rack and the guy, you could put your hand like that and there was his fanny, and then the next one and the next one and the next one. But you know what, as a teenager or a young fellow, didn't bother me at all. Today I don't know whether I could do that.
Your first Mediterranean cruise, was that a midshipman cruise?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Tell us about it. And what were the midshipmen like?
Well, the midshipmen were all assigned, depending, I guess, on what their future was and their grade, whatever they were going to do in the Navy, either communications, gunnery, and they went to certain departments, and that's where they were confined, in those Navy compartments, whether it was signaling or communication bridge, engineering department, the whole works. And that sometimes there would only be about 10 in a compartment. Sometimes those compartments had 40, 50 midshipmen, again, stacked up like cordwood. And we had there's a couple of football players. I think Joe Bellino, that was a great running back for Navy, was in one of those cruises. They all seemed to, we didn't get to, you'd say, hi, how you doing? You'd see them on Liberty sometimes. They pretty much stuck together. But I don't recall any problems, fighting or anything like that. As a matter of fact, with a couple of thousand or close to Navy personnel aboard the Jersey and 62 for Marines, and then Liberty Call would go in Valencia or Portsmouth, England, or wherever it might be, you would think, or even Norfolk itself. But the Jersey Marines and the Jersey sailors pretty much got along very good together. They razzed the heck out of each other. They had names for us, we had names for them, but if you were in trouble or thought there was going to be trouble on the beach or on Liberty, a Jersey Marine would stand up for a Jersey sailor and vice versa. So I think that's entirely different than what a lot of people say about, the Marines and the Navy. I met a lot of really neat really nice guys aboard ship, Navy guys. Oh yeah, you know, you go up and serve the admiral another cup of tea. You guys, what the hell are you doing? You know, and we called them scupper ducks, and I hate to say it, but shit under a Dixie cup. And they, you know, but one of my best friends from Morristown served aboard the Jersey, and we would go on Liberty together, and he'd have 3 or 4 of his friends and 3 or 4 Marine friends. As I said, my tour of duty, I had a good tour of duty, and I really met a lot of great people. There were some times weren't so good, but they were far and few between.
How many cruises to the Med did you go?
Let's see, the first 2.
2.
2 cruises.
Tell us about some of the ports that you visited, and tell us about your duties aboard ship.
Well, again, almost every port that the Jersey would either come into, you would have like a general quarters where all the Marines fell out in dress blues, and usually the mayor or the mayor and some military dignitaries would come aboard the Jersey and inspect the Marine Guard. They'd inspect the whole ship. Matter of fact, a lot of times they'd man the rail. The sailors would do that. I remember one was particularly it was a close call, but we were in Oslo. I think it was the second trip to Oslo, Norway, which was a neat port and a beautiful cruise up these fjords with mountains on both sides of you. You wonder, is this ship going to be able to get, but it did. We had the Prince of Norway and some high-ranking general military admirals come aboard, and we had just been issued, well, we had the white gloves, white bayonet scabbard covers. We had, of course, the white duty belt, white gloves, white, blue, white, everything. And we fell out about 15 times, and 15 times nobody showed up, went back down below, got a call again, went up. We were right between the first and second turret, 16-inch turrets. That's where we fell out. And it was either a general, it was a general because he had a barracks cap, and the Marines were coming to port arms and inspection arms, and we had these new bayonets. They weren't the standard for the M1. They were these fancy with chrome handles, and I don't know. And one of the fellows came to port arms, and he was a little out of whack, and this general was leaning over like that. That bayonet came up and took his barracks cap and flipped it over his head, and no one, I mean, there was guys, they were just straining not to laugh. And our captain, Captain Shepard, he graciously picked up the cap and talked to him and put it in it. They went on down the line. Now, Captain Shepard...
He didn't draw any blood.
Captain Shepard was the son of the then Commandant of the Marine Corps, Lemuel C. Shepard III. So when we heard that our first Captain Randall was being assigned another duty, we were getting a new captain, and it was going to be Lemuel C. Shepard III, the son of the Commandant. We went, oh. He had fought in Korea, was decorated, and probably a little bit hard to know, but probably one of the nicest, and I look back, really someone to look up to, because there wasn't one thing that we ever did that Shepard couldn't do as good as, but most of the time twice as good or better than anyone. I saw that man at 500 yards, offhand, standing, put 10 shots in a bull at 500 yards. The normal position is prone, and you get yourself really braced. He stood up and shot 10 rounds right into the bull. We had a forced march one time, and he gave a 72-hour pass to anybody that made it all the way out and all the way back. I got a pass. Shepard must have gone up and down that line. He went twice as far as anyone in that, and he never broke a sweat. Full pack, 2 canteens, full pack, and marching on a beach on an angle, and the water in everybody had blisters like 50-cent pieces on their feet. I went to a corpsman before I came home to Morristown to get the pus taken out with a needle in my feet. I couldn't even get to the bus stop. the blisters were. Shepherd was like it's like he walked around the block. He had a call in the morning, and I was corporal, or I was sergeant of the guard. I was a corporal, but I was sergeant of the guard, and I personally went up just to knock on the door to make sure he was up. He was up in officers' country, and I remember the door was open a crack, and I thought he was between two locker boxes, his feet and toes back on this locker box, his fingers out on the other locker box, doing push-ups.
Impressive guy.
He was, I saw in Leatherneck magazine, he retired, I think in the Marine Corps, that's a lieutenant general. He retired as a lieutenant general.
That's pretty far up there.
Yeah. But he, as I said, he was excellent with a rifle. Of course, in the Marine Corps, you live, and from the minute you hit Parris Island, you sleep with it, you clean it 50 times a day. You have to be, I mean, that's, in the Marines, the rifleman is it's like the gunny sergeant runs the corps, and he runs the rifle platoons. And there was an Army general, and I have the quote, it was 1952 in Korea. I could find it, but he said, the safest place in Korea is behind a Marine Corps rifle platoon. And this was from an Army general. Safest place in Korea, that's what he said.
Tell us about your duties aboard in the Marine Detachment aboard the New Jersey.
Well, when the ship was in port, there were officers' area where the officers came aboard, which is in the bow of the ship. The fantail was where the enlisted men came aboard. So you had 4 on and 4 off where you stood, whatever the uniform was. It could be greens, it could be blues, it could be tropicals. And you looked at passes, officers and civilian dignitaries, you saluted them. If they had any questions of where they were to report or who was going to meet them, you had a list with you.
This was where? On the quarterdeck?
This was right on the pier before they went
okay.
up the ladder, we call it, or the gangway. And then there was almost everybody, and especially new guys, were broken in most of the time in the brig. And there was a brig aboard the Jersey. I don't know what there was a couple of holding cells. One was very small. One, I think you could put 10, 15 guys in, but that was one of the big duties, brig sentry. Sometimes if there was if someone was getting a bad conduct discharge or something really bad and they were leaving the ship, sometimes we were detailed to take them to wherever they were going. Sometimes they were going to Deasy. Sometimes they went on a train all the way up to the naval brig in Portsmouth, up in New Hampshire. Most of the time though it was aboard ship. We had, whether we were at sea or not at sea in port, there was always, just like the Navy, we had a lot of work details. And generally, to come into port, we spent out in Hampton Roads, out in we call it the Bay. We spent 2 or 3 days offloading all the ammunition. I mean everything, 5-inch rounds, 16-inch rounds. They had huge barges and cranes before you were allowed to pull, come into Norfolk and go to your assigned pier. The ships that had ammunition had to get rid of it and store it. And then they took on stores, they took on everything, and you helped with, I remember carrying crates of whatever it was to the 3 decks down below the chow hall and getting it down the ladders. So we had a lot of work. We did the same. We weren't excluded from any work details. And as a matter of fact, the Marine compartment had to, if a chief petty officer came down and said, I need 3 or 4 men, or he said, I might need one of your guys for 2 or 3 weeks. Well, I remember 2 or 3 weeks, that was laundry duty. And it was great duty because you worked horrendous hours, but weekends, the chief in the laundry, he used to say, you guys have got it all squared away. Where do you live? And I said, I live in Morristown, New Jersey. Well, here's a 48-hour pass. Or here's a... So laundry duty was tough in one way, hotter than the dickens. You worked with skivvies and shower shoes and a sweat would... But we did that. I did laundry a couple times. Painting. The sailors talk about chipping paint, and then they paint it, and 6 months later they chip it again. I always thought that was also because keep guys busy. I mean, it was something. There was always, you always had something coming up. There was always something. Well, you know that tomorrow we're going to be doing. Captain Shepherd would take us on marches out to the beach area where we would load up full packs and that. And the only bad thing about that was we were seagoing, and a lot of times we go a long time before wearing combat boots. We had all our battle gear, but that was stowed away. But then when you take guys who have been doing sea duty and put them on a 20-some mile forced march with full pack, we qualified, had to qualify with the 45. In the Marine Corps, you must qualify every year with the M1, so that would come up, and there'd be pre-qualification, and you better qualify. You know, you didn't qualify in the Marine Corps in your platoon, you were dropped back into the next platoon. You did another 10 weeks, and if you didn't qualify, you would drop back again, and then finally they'd kick you out.
How about your orderly duties for the captain and the admiral?
It was more or less that you were on the bridge, the 05 level, and his quarters were on the 05 level, his bedroom and dining area.
Behind the navigation bridge?
Yes.
That's 04.
Oh, is that the 04?
Yeah,
okay.
04 level.
04 level. But anyway, it was just basically that you were there. Once in a while there would be a request. Private, I think Commander Hardigan, who was the exec officer, went back to, could you make sure that he gets this message, or would you tell him to give me a buzz or get up here or something like that? That would come up occasionally, but I'll never forget when, again, Admiral Parker came aboard. Geez, this is an admiral now. Now, our captain was still captain of the ship, but the flag, Admiral Parker was aboard. And I remember the first time, gee, we got to go up. Yeah, you got duty. You got it. You've been put with the flag. It was either Captain Shepherd or Lieutenant Lang went around the compartment one day, and I happened to be one, and Taylor, this guy's in this picture. You are now assigned to the flag. Well, I didn't know I didn't know what it was. Flag of what? You know, and what it was. I'm assigned to a flag. Okay. So Sergeant Beverly told us, well, there's an admiral coming aboard. I think his name is whatever. He said, and we're going to be his orderlies. We're assigned to the flag. And it could be possible if he leaves the Jersey and goes to, you'll go with him, or wherever he goes, but that didn't happen. And I remember the first day, again, it was the 04 level, and Admiral, both O'Donnell, or Captain O'Donnell, and Admiral Parker, and every time you go around this way and you come back like this. And one day, I'll never forget, he had come out of his quarters and he was on the navigation bridge, and he came around the corner and he had his admiral's cap on, a bathrobe, slippers, and I, like that, and I almost knocked my head off it. And Private, what's your name? Private Deasy, sir. You a first name? I said, Kent. He said, Kent, do me a favor. he said, I know when your sergeant in the guard is up here or your first lieutenant, he said, you got it, I understand that. He said, but if they're not around, he said, how about once in the morning and once in the evening, that ought to do it. About this. He says, I get tired of that. Was tired of this up and down. And he was in a bathroom. I felt real bad. He had to leave partway through our med thing. He had a foot amputated with cancer. And I read later that this...
Why don't you show us the picture, Ken?
Yes, well, I have a personal picture of Admiral Parker, and it says, well, as a private first class in the PFC, Kent Deasy, with kindest regards, Edward N. Parker, Rear Admiral, U.S. Navy.
Hold it up a little bit. Okay, that's good. Down a little bit. Okay, good. Thank you.
I found out later he was quite decorated. He was a destroyer, leader of a destroyer outfit somewhere in the Pacific in World War II, and was a real fighting, really a neat guy. This picture was taken in front of a 40 millimeter mount, and this was the Admiral's staff of Marines. PFC, we called him Possum because he was from the South. His last name was Taylor. This guy, PFC John Adamovic, became a priest. Louis Lane, a really good friend of mine, was a bouncer in his father's bars in Pittsburgh. Sergeant Beverly, I didn't know a lot about, but a very nice fellow. And that's me. And another guy that I didn't know that well, but called Stump. His last name was Stump. We called him Stumpy, but he was every bit of 6 foot. Everyone here was, except this one, was about 6 foot. These guys are all over 6 foot. We were the Admiral's orderlies.
Great, thank you.
And another thing about Admiral Parker, a lot of times when he was on the bridge, he said, you know, I remember in Barcelona there was really bad weather, and the Liberty launches were being canceled. Nobody was going ashore. I mean, really choppy. And we were out a couple of miles out off the city of Barcelona, out in the bay, or out in the mid. And I remember he coming up one time, he said, Louis Lane and I were on duty, and he said, you fellows want to go ashore? I go, sure. I said something, well, Admiral, there's no Liberty. He says, no. He said, I'm going ashore. I said, well, I don't think our gunny will let us go. He said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I'll get a note down to your gunny. He said, you're going ashore with me. He said, there was no reason. He had business to do, and I wasn't driving. I think Louis Lane and I were the only two. I know the only two from the Battleship New Jersey were on Liberty in Barcelona. He said, you guys go ahead and do what you want to do. He said, but you better be at this fleet landing at 0600, whatever. He said, because that's when I go back to New Jersey. And if you're not here, he said, you're done. He said, but enjoy yourself. We went off and had a ball. Came back. We're beeped aboard here, two Marine privates and PFC coming aboard ship with an admiral. Like we were his grandkids, you know. It was great. It was great. But that's how he was.
That's great. Tell us about some of the ports. What was your favorite port in the Med?
I guess maybe because, to me, now everyone had different. I liked Portsmouth in England. We were there 3 or 4 times because if I could get a couple of hours off extra, I even got a leave one time of 2 days, or had to be back in 2 days or 3 days, but I went and visited relatives that were in London, or right outside of London. So that was sort of neat to be able to do that.
How far was Portsmouth from London?
It was a train ride, half an hour, something like that. I remember meeting an aunt in Trafalgar Square. I remember riding the big double-decker buses. I had and you sort of, the money was quite easy to understand, the exchange. The people, of course, they spoke English, real English, better than we
That
did.
helps.
That helped. But the foreign ports, because they catered to whether it was Valencia or Barcelona, Lisbon, Cannes, France, especially the shop owners and the ladies of the evening that were on the fleet landing by the thousands, because you got thousands of sailors not only from the Jersey and the Northampton, and there might be 3 ships in there, and their economy went from like 0 to 100% just selling junk on the fleet landing, water pipes and stuff that wasn't worth 10 cents. You bought for $1. An American dollar then to them. American dollar, you could buy a bottle of cognac and a couple of beers with $1.
That's pretty good.
So, but I enjoyed them all. I think again, the English, as a matter of fact, most of the people that dealt selling any kind of goods, alcohol, whatever it was, they knew by your rank, whether you were a seaman 3rd or 2nd or a bosun, whatever, a corporal, a sergeant. Not only did they know what you made a month, but they knew when payday went. And you couldn't say, I don't have it, not too much. Oh, no, you pay, they knew exactly. So they knew enough English, and sometimes they let it, like, they didn't understand, but they did. There was enough. It just behooved them to know what was going on and what the rate was and what kind of money was coming in. But boy, their eyes would be out of their. I mean, you get 8, 9, 10 guys going in a little tiny restaurant bar, and oh my goodness, they would give you a bath. I mean, they'd clean your nails, they'd do anything, because you, as the saying goes, you're spending money like a drunken sailor, and they loved it, and they couldn't wait for you to come back again. And some of them we knew from the first cruise. They treated you like family.
Excuse me. Okay, what about other ports? Any other ports?
Well, I think one of the neatest, as I said, I think one of the cleanest and some of the best food is Oslo, Norway. If you could get topside, just going up those fjords. I don't know the miles, but it took hours to get up into Oslo. Then it was a big port. There was even Russian ships, merchant ships in there a couple times when we were in there. And we were told to behave ourselves if there were Russian merchant marines or sailors on the beach. Never had any problem that I know of. But there was, I can't think of the name of it, but I know you could get, they really catered. They thought, and they had the best, everything was steak and eggs for breakfast. And I mean steak and eggs and muffins. And I mean, and we were eating.
Where was this? On
Oslo,
shore?
Norway.
Okay.
And one time, the so-called, what I called steak, and you could cut it with a fork, it was absolutely delicious. I was told it was oxen. It was oxen meat, but I don't care what it was. It was absolutely delicious. So Norway, I think the food, and it was a very, no debris or papers or trash. I mean, the streets were clean. Even the harbor, the port was picture book. And we were there one time when there was a 24-hour day. Then Day of the Midnight Sun or something, was the 24 hours of daylight. That was sort of different. Because we left there and I got a little certificate, which I couldn't find. I was going to bring it. You go past the 78th parallel and you get just like the ones, the polywogs that go across the equator. We got the Royal Order of the Blue Nose for going up above the 78th parallel. We were near Iceland, Greenland. Then we went back that time to Greenock, Scotland, which was a big port where they did a lot of shipbuilding and repair. People in Scotland treated us real nice too. I was invited to a family dinner, met a elderly man, and he said, "Do you have Liberty tomorrow?" Or the next, I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, we're gonna," and they cooked us a beautiful meal, and we had Scotch whiskey and yeah, Greenock, Scotland.
There's another big British port up in northern Scotland. I forget the name of it.
Not Greenock. There's two. Yeah, and we were there too. I have to look at my duffel bag and try to remember
Okay.
what it was. I know because I took a train ride from there to Edinburgh, which was about a 45-minute hour train ride, but I can't think of the name of the port.
That's okay. It's not important. What about when you did honors? Tell us about doing honors aboard ship.
Well, again, it was most always your first, when the ship came into whatever port you were coming into, right away there were many, for another word, dignitaries that would come aboard to see the Jersey, to meet our Captain O'Donnell or Captain O'Donnell and the Admiral. There were dinner parties given by our captain or admiral where some of their people came aboard. They brought their wives and families sometimes. Sometimes there were even events aboard where everybody was welcomed. People that wanted to just come from the fleet landing and see the Jersey. Sometimes they would cook up, they'd have lemonade or sodas, and people would bring kids and they'd come aboard. But generally speaking, we always were in full, no matter what time of year, we were in dress blues when the dignitaries came aboard. And usually there was some military too, and they would troop the line, and of course our captain, gunny sergeant and staff and top sergeant, and they'd inspect the troops. When we left port, we always fell out, but that could be uniform of the day. When we left port, sometimes there would be ships, tugboats firing the water and one thing or another. Sometimes big signs, goodbye. Sometimes big welcome signs. As we came into Pieris near Istanbul in Turkey, they had all kinds of welcoming boats and blowing horns. And the first thing I saw on deck and we were standing at attention in dress blues, was the biggest Coca-Cola sign I think I've ever saw. It must have been 3 stories high and 2 stories wide. Coca-Cola. So we knew they were waiting for us.
Did the New Jersey ever go to the Pacific while you were aboard?
No, it didn't. It had just got back. It had been back about 5 or 6 months from Korea and some of the Pacific ports, and gone to Bremerhaven or in Washington, one of the ports in Washington. Bremerton, I'm thinking of Germany. And then it had come all the way down through the Panama Canal, came back up and now its home port was Pier 6 in Norfolk. And that's when I picked it up. That's when I was assigned. I never forget because I think it was a Sunday. There was no duty. Some guys had gone on liberty. There was at C School in Port, there was a place called Little Tun Tavern right below us. Some of the guys were down drinking beer or whatever, and I can't think of his name. I can see his face. A real neat staff sergeant we all liked. He came in. He said, "Any of you guys from New Jersey, aren't you?" Or you? He pointed at me and a guy named Phil Pizzuti. He said, "Aren't you guys from Jersey?" And yeah, we're in our racks. Yeah, we are, Sergeant. He said, "How would you like to go aboard the New Jersey?" Yeah. Oh, I thought about, well, gee, I'm in New Jersey. I'll be home all the time. Well, of course, you're not really thinking, but anyway. He said, "Well, get your sea bags packed." He said, there's a runner from the Jersey coming over. It was a Navy bosun or someone, I don't know. But he said, "You be ready down there." He said, "In uniform." He said, we wore tropicals, and he said, "I want you squared away." He said, "And have everything," he said, "in that sea bag." He said, "Can you do it in a half an hour?" Yes, sir, Sergeant, we can do it. And that's how I came aboard the Jersey.
Why don't you show us the picture of yourself in the book
On the New
on the
Jersey.
New Jersey?
Yeah, it's, I bought this book not knowing it. I got it when I went to visit the Jersey when it first got over to Camden. And this is the era that there's about two or three chapters in here. The 1950s. And that's a picture of me in a room where we built a plaster Paris scale with elevations, and that it was for map reading and for exercise. And Captain Shepard would set up a position, and then he would ask, "How would you go about if you were a fire team or in a squad? Would you need a platoon? Could you do it with a squad? Where would you start?" That's me. That's a very good friend of mine who was actually the grandson of the Yingling Beer Company, Corporal Raymond Yingling. And this is the picture of us with Admiral Parker. We showed the bigger picture of that. But this is in the book called Battleship New Jersey, An Illustrated History by Paul Stillwell. I bought that at a little knick-knack shop when you go aboard ship.
Yeah, I know Paul. He autographed my copy
Is
of
that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was in there, and I said, "Oh my goodness, I remember. There's England. Whoops, there's me."
Actually, we have some of his audio tapes from his research for that book in our collection of tapes in the oral history compartment.
Yeah, this is I started to read it again. There's Captain Shepard there. Matter of fact, he made major. Captain Shepard made major aboard the ship when I was before the detachment. We broke up. Well, all through the month of January in '57, guys were assigned different duties. The sailors were every day another compartment sort of emptied out. And I got assigned to MP Company in Norfolk by the Naval Air Station. It's called Camp Elmore. Tiny. You could, if you had a good arm, you could throw a stone from one gate to the other. I mean, it was an MP company, and there was a women's, squad that did a lot of typing and work at the Naval Air Station. There was a little tiny motor pool, and that was it. That was the whole base. It was very small. And we were...
How long were you there?
End of January, maybe beginning of February to September when I got out. I got out early. I put in to get out early so I could go back to school at Rutgers. And I wouldn't have been due to get out till, when I joined, it was November 14th or 24th or something like that when I went in. But I got out early. I got out like the first week of September. So I could go back. I started back at Rutgers of South Jersey.
Had you done any work at Rutgers before you went into the
Yes.
Marines?
Yeah.
You did.
I dropped out at halfway through, but I joined the Marines. That's another thing my mother was not that happy with. I was in college and I was safe in college. But actually, my mom didn't, I have another, if you want to hear, this is actually true. A lot of people won't believe this, but my mother was not really tuned into, well, she knew the Marines because her sister's son had been in the Marines, my cousin Frank. And when I said, you know, he was in World War II and actually celebrated his 19th or 20th birthday on Guadalcanal. But when I said Marines, she was really upset that I joined the Marines. But she didn't really understand, to her, the Marines and maybe Camp Okanagan, where you go, you know, you're going away. And I'll never forget, my father was driving my friend and I to down to the depot there on 2nd Street, that, what do they call it, the Common,
2nd Street where? In Camden?
no, in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
The Customs House.
Okay.
And that's where we had a physical and got sworn in. And we had to be there, of course, at a certain time. Well, my friend's mother, sister, older sister, drove the car over, and both them were crying in the driveway, and Bill got out, and I'm sort of standing there. My aunt's on the back porch, and my mother and father and my dad's trying to say, my mother didn't want to let me go. And my father said, Gene, he said, the boys have got to be in Philadelphia, and they've got to be at the Customs House at a certain time. So, goodbye again. And my mother, standing on the steps, and she said, now don't forget, she's talking to me, don't forget to wear your rubbers. You know how you catch cold. And if they treat you mean, you just get right on that bus and come home again. And all I could think about when that sergeant hit me with that swagger stick, even before, just as I got off the steps, I said, I thought to my mom, they're treating me mean, but and if they treat you mean, you just get right on the bus and come home again. That was a classic. Here I was trying to be John Wayne, going off the wrinkle. She's got me with raincoat and rubbers because my feet get wet, I'll get cold. If they treat me mean, come home. It didn't work out.
What did you get your degree in after your military?
I left, of course, I went to the University of Massachusetts School of Arboriculture to take up the field to become a certified tree expert. That was a new program, well, fairly new. They did in 2 years what is now, and has been for years, a 4-year program. You have everything from forestry to plant pathology, entomology. I mean, it's a very tough program. And we went to school at 8 o'clock in the morning. I didn't get home sometimes till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And that was 5 days a week because they were trying to cram your lab work, field work, everything into and the year I got out, the next year it became a 4-year program. Associate's degree in entomology. But I wanted it strictly, and then the 2 years we did that, each year you had to go back to your employer, and you of course had to work in the tree business, and then he wrote a report that you had to take back, or was taken back to school to give to your professors and to show how you progressed, how you were on the job, what were your duties. So it was between working and actually in the classroom. It was a 2-year program when I did it, and then a 4-year program, and it's still a 4-year program.
How do you feel about your military service looking back now? What did it do for you? How did it impact your life?
Well, I think for me, and probably more than half the guys I ran into, I remember she was my English teacher, Miss Rodney, at Morristown High School. And she was interviewing students and trying to see, she was the class advisor. It was towards the end, we were graduating in a few weeks, and she brought each one in separately, and I remember think back how wise she was. She said, you know, Ken, she said, you're not a student. And I had to agree with that. She said, you've only done enough just to get by. She said, you need to grow up. She said, there's only two things that I can think of. And she wasn't trying to be nasty. I didn't think she was anyway. I told my mother was a lot. She said, there's only two things that I can say to you, or you should. She said, get a job, she said, or go in the service. I mean, I went in the service. I tried Rutgers and Camden for a few months, and I should have never even gone. I had no. So I think at least the Marine Corps to me, it was good for me. Now again, no one was trying to kill me, dropping bombs on me. So, but I think I think young guys, a couple of years in the service or whatever, it really doesn't hurt at all. I'd say most of the time it doesn't hurt at all. It gives you a little chance to. And then I really figured out, you know, what I wanted. I decided, you know, I got to do something, and I got married right away and had children. And there wasn't any time for fooling around. I had to get down and study and do a good job, get a job, work, and I think the Marine Corps had a lot to do with that. It also teaches you, you know, how to take the good with the bad. That sometimes the things can be very disappointing, and you, why me or something, but then you learn, you know, you have to hang in there, you know. Maybe, I guess, my father used to always quote Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, you know. And I think it makes you a man. Some guys rebel, and maybe some never would come around, but I think service in general, I guess whether it's Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, for a young man, I would recommend it highly. I mean, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea if it was compulsory. Really.
I agree with you.
I mean, that's my experience, but I think back of some of the things, even though we thought they were sort of crazy, our junior DI was with us 99% of the time, and boy, he was meaner than cat dirt 9 days old, but some of the things he said, and later on, when I got to know him a little better, when we went back to casual company, and we were waiting to be assigned, he was doing his job, doing the best he could and trying to make something out of it. And you look at it, you take 70-some guys tripping over each other, didn't know their right from their left. You try to get them organized, you got 10, 12 weeks to do it. And then he has to turn around and start in a few days and pick up another 72 idiots and start it all over again. Oh,
That's not easy work.
that is, I'll tell you, when he's harassing us at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's him he's up. When we're at the rifle range and he's trying to show you he's firing the weapon. I mean, it's like Captain Shepard. I think the Marine Corps, too, the NCOs have an obligation to your men, whether you're a corporal, which is considered a non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps, and officers, I know Shepard for sure, and that's how he was in Korea, I'm sure. The men came first, but he would never ask a private or a PSA to do something that he couldn't do or wouldn't do. I like that idea. I like that idea.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on an hour, so we're gonna. Is there any stories that you wanted to tell that
I think
we didn't get to?
I mean, I'm sure I could go on and on, but I just appreciate the time, and
We appreciate your time.
I just hope that my little bit in the Marine Corps did some good for some. Again, my wife says once a Marine, you never stop. You're always, you know, the Marine Corps. My father gave me this ring. It's worn down to a frazzle now, but I never hardly ever take it off. I mentioned my cousin Frank, who celebrated a very young birthday as a 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal. I remember him coming home when I guess I was 10 years old, 10 and 45, yeah. I don't know how old Frank was then. He had to be 10 years or 11, 12 years older than me, but he came in uniform because he'd been injured in the service and he had been in hospitals, and I remember him taking the lapel pin off. My father had a little pantry he called his bar, and they were in there having drinks, and I was just like that listening to my cousin Frank, and I remember he pinned it on the collar of my shirt, and I said right there, I said, someday, I said, I'm going to be a Marine just like you. I called him Uncle, Uncle Frank, and it worked out that way.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your service, Kent, and thank you for your taking the time to tell us the story of your service. And with that, we're going to wrap it up.
Okay.
I'm going to sign off by saying this is Ron Guttardi, Volunteer Director of the Oral History Program aboard the Battleship New Jersey. The date is April 26th, 2016, and our interviewee today has been Kent Deasy of the United States Marine Corps. Thanks again, Kent.
Thank you.